course, I wasn't even intending on doing a live today. Matter of fact, what I should have done was turned off, and I'll better do that right now. And I had one scheduled for today, and it may be too late because it may be actually showing up, but that's okay. Um, I want to see if I can turn that one off, but I was moved to do this one today, so give me 1 second to adjust the other one that I got out there. I appreciate you guys bearing with me here. That wasn't my intention. Like I said, I just realized that I had that one out there, so I wanted to kind of pause it and we can push that one out for next week. All right, you got me live. I apologize for that pause. I realized I had one scheduled for this week. I wasn't planning on doing this talk, but some things had come up, and I'm looking at doing a workshop this coming Saturday. So wanted to talk about the process of you making a shift. Listen, we're about ready to step into a brand new year. And I keep thinking about the quote from Mr. Lindo. He would often say that, it took him a few years before he was able to bring about his desired change, but it wasn't necessary that it was to take a few years. He said a few days, a few weeks, a few months, maybe, but not years. But he says that that speaks to his level of being stubborn. A lot of times, especially when we're hearing people talk about change, when you're talking about theory and everything else, good to see you, brother. Everybody thinks that change takes a long period of time. And I think about some events in my own life that where change was almost immediate. But let me explain something because I think that there's a misnomer when it comes to change. We think because we've made an internal change that everything around us automatically changes. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that a lot of times when you sow a seed and the seed begins to give harvest, the environment initially may not reflect, the abundance of that seed. And likewise with your individual change, when you go about to change, your change can be instantaneously done. But just because you've made a change on the inward, it doesn't mean the mirror or the reflection of the outward is going to immediately see that change. And sometimes for those who know us, it can sometimes even seem longer. And I think about the master teacher when he was walking upon the earth and he was doing many miracles. And someone said, isn't that the carpenter's son? Isn't that the son of Mary? Isn't that the brothers of, then they called off his brothers, and aren't his sisters also among those? So they saw the man, the Jesus that they grew up with. And so when he started doing the miracles, they were unfamiliar with that person and they wanted to put him back into the box of what they knew. Likewise with you. When you go about this journey of change, and like I said, for those who may be interested, I'm going to have a link in the comments. And basically what it's going to do is tell you how to become a part of that Saturday conversation. Matter of fact, those who sign up before Thursday midnight, there's going to be a discount on it, like 33% or so. But my whole point is, if you want to bring about change, then of course you're going to have to understand how change works. And often what people don't realize is that just because they've changed, it doesn't necessarily mean that the environment or the people or the events that they find themselves in because of their old habits immediately change. But I promise you, over a course of time, the world around you will begin to acquiesce and bring about the desired change that you're seeking. But you have to stay in it long enough. And that's the problem with most of us. We don't stick into change long enough. But we're going to talk about a 5-step process to bring about rapid change. And like I said, quoting Mr. Lindo, change can happen immediately. For him, it took years, but like he stated, it doesn't necessarily have to take years if one is wholehearted. He wasn't wholehearted. He was stubborn. He was stuck in his ways, and he had a certain mindset that he had to overcome. And that's with all of us. I've experienced events that change was almost immediately. Other events where change took a little bit longer, depending upon the events and my mindset concerning those events. So let's go and talk about change. First and foremost, when you start looking at, we're going to use an acrostic called shift. And so the first letter of the acrostic shift is you got to begin seeing the patterns. Most of us, the reason why we don't experience lasting change is because we're not a student of ourselves. We don't see the things that are holding us back, so we keep repeating those things. I was looking at a video from an influencer recently, matter of fact, this morning, and I don't want to call the gentleman's name off, but he does these great videos and he talks about, people making bad decisions, and he will create a video around this person and he'll kind of give a blurb on their life story and how their decisions led to this bad outcome. And so he was saying that he started playing this particular video game, kind of like the farming game that took place, a few years back, where you start building out farms and livelihood. And so this is building like a community and so forth. And he was so engrossed in this game that his wife said, you need to stop watching that game or, we're going to have some trouble. He said, no, baby, you got to see this game. This game is so amazing. And so what she started doing was playing the game. So both of them are kind of addicted on the game. And I wrote to him, I'm sure that other people also wrote to him, because then he often says on his videos, and this is kind of going to give it away a little bit, then he says, then he says until, and then until tells the other side of the story. He's promoting this video game. He's probably playing this video game. And pretty soon that video game, if we're not mindful, will consume our time. And all of a sudden we find ourselves addicted to, these platforms. We find ourselves addicted to television. We find ourselves addicted to sports. We find ourselves addicted to work. If what you're addicted to, if that habit is giving you what it is that you want, if you're getting the takeaway or the results that you want from that habit, then there's really no need to make the shift. But if you're not getting the results from playing those video games, from watching those videos, from watching Netflix, eating a certain diet, then you have to become an observer of yourself and say, listen, this particular result isn't getting me to where it is that I want to be, do, or have. And so the first thing is we have to see a pattern. And if the pattern or the habit isn't getting us the results that we want, then we have to be willing to go into the next step and halt. So again, we're using the acrostic shift. So first we see the pattern. If the pattern isn't getting us what it is that we want, then we have to be willing to halt. When I was a part of a church, the gentleman that was the pastor was a gentleman by the name of Charles Stanley, and I was probably with that church probably about 10 or 15 years. But Charles Stanley would often say something, and he wasn't the only one that I heard say this, but he used an acrostic or an acronym called HALT. And HALT meant don't allow yourself to get too hungry, too angry, too lonely, or too tired. Because when you open yourself up to those dynamics, then a whole floodgate of other things start to follow, and you start taking actions and doing things that don't always line up with your best interest. So the next thing that we have to do is halt the habit. If the habit isn't getting us what it is that we want, you got to stop it. Now, once you start going through this pattern, it's going to almost become instantaneously. What I'm telling you is something that really takes a matter of seconds. Now, I'm going through the process, and what happens in going through the process, appreciate you, brother, in going through the process, it seems like it's a long drawn out thing. The things that I'm telling you in this shift process, now, of course, what you will learn in the workshop is going in much deeper and learning some deeper tools and so forth. But you can instantaneously begin to shift your dynamics, who it is that you are as a person, who it is that you want to manifest in your life, the things that you want to, those things can happen. but you have to understand how your mind works, how you work as an individual. And these are what I'm going to give you today through the shift process. So you halt, you stop, you pause. And again, like I stated, these things that I'm giving you, even though it may take me 25 minutes to give them to you, you're going to find that in acting out the process, these things are going to be taking a fraction of a second. So Mr. Lindell used to say this, that he would often ask himself, where is this thought taking me? And you have to ask yourself the same thing. Where is the thought taking you? If the thought isn't taking you, and we think that, well, it's just one thought. Warren Buffett said, the secret of making money, one of the greatest unknown secrets to making money was compound interest. Same thing with compound thoughts. You think that I only thought that thought one time and it shouldn't make a difference. But what happens is we think anywhere from 60, 70, 80,000 thoughts a day. Many of those thoughts are on repeat. So this is why many people say, well, I tried Neville's technique, getting into a state of kin and sleep before going to bed and imagine what it was that I wanted, and it didn't work. It didn't work because throughout the course of your day, 23 hours and 59 minutes, you were thinking on negative, erroneous thoughts, things that you didn't want to attract in your life. But that was your whole conversation, your dialect throughout the whole day. So that 1 minute prior to going to sleep, you said, well, let me go and imagine something, lovely and a good report. Let me imagine what it is that I want to be, do I have? Your subconscious mind is going to be pulling from what you've given it throughout the course of the day. Yes, that one thought that you had before going to bed can have some influence, but overall, it's going to be, what did I think about all throughout the day? And this is what the top 0.00001% understand. They understand that thoughts create reality. I lost a couple of people when I said that, akin to sleep, people don't understand the power of compound thought. People don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear that there's something that they have to do on their part. They don't want to hear that it takes discipline of your thinking. They don't want to hear that there's something that they have to do. So when a creator comes up, now most people get on and say, oh, you don't have to do anything, just get in a state of kin and sleep, and magically everything's going to change, your life's going to be rearranged and all things going to work out. And what they notice is that everything's not working out. It's because they're not consistent and persistent on what it is that they're giving their attention to. But so many so-called gurus come up and they give you the impression that you don't have to do anything but just think this one single thought before going to bed. Neville was one of the most disciplined people in the manifestation community of his time. Same with Dr. Joseph Murphy, Neville's student Louise Burley. You can look at Louise's story and look how she lived out, how she practiced, how she was in control of her thinking. But we've been placed in this microwave community, society, so forth, and we do want things instantaneously. And even though the thought begins to manifest itself almost immediately, many of us are pulling up the seeds because we're not sticking to what it is that we say that we want persistently and consistently long enough. So the seed begins to germinate. And as that seed begins to germinate, we start shifting our attention and say, well, that's just not going to work out. This stuff is a bunch of crock. So what you've done at that moment is just pulled up the seed of your imagination. And now you're wondering why your harvest didn't come through. People say, well, I've thought about this, and I think about it throughout the day and, it doesn't work for me. The person's predominant thought is, if they're going to be honest, this stuff doesn't work for me. And ultimately, what they do is look for evidence of it not working so that they can come back to whoever the person telling them how these principles work. This stuff is a bunch of crock and you guys are frauds and blah, blah, blah. And I say to anybody that comes back to me and says something like that, you're correct. They're correct in the fact that that's their core belief. And because that's their core belief, it can't be otherwise. So if you think that this stuff is you're so powerful that even if you believe a lie to be true, then for you, this stuff doesn't work is going to be true. If you believe that money is hard to come by, then for you, you're going to find the evidence that money is hard to come by. If you believe that there are no good men, no good women out there, then you're going to see the evidence and you're going to say, see, I told you so. If you believe that all politicians are crooked, I'm not saying that you're off the mark, but what you're going to do is see the evidence of all politicians being crooked. My point to you, be it done unto you as you believe. It can't be otherwise. You got to understand it. Your mind, and this is the purpose of the workshop, the seminar. I want to give you some tools that you can begin to shift your thinking almost immediately. But I have to forewarn you, it's not enough to shift your thinking and, as scripture says, to be a double-minded person. It says that let not the double-minded person, these things are giving you principles, rules that are unshakable. So it says, let not the double-minded person believe that he or she shall receive anything from, I say, the law of right decree. You can also have a law of reverse decree, but scripture says, receive anything from the Lord. Like I said, I like to say that the Lord is the law of the right decree. What are you decreeing from your consciousness, your mouth, morning, noon, and night? That's what you're going to see. So this is why, it's like the person going on a trip. And they say, well, you're telling the subconscious, well, I want to go to New York. Well, no, I don't want to go. I think I want to go to California. Because you're indecisive in where it is that you want to go, you're not giving your subconscious mind anything to work with of stability. So let not that person believe that they shall receive anything, because they're straddling a fence and they're on both sides, that they will receive anything from the law, their law of right decree. So let's move forward. So first, again, these things are going to happen very rapidly. They're not going to, so I'm giving you the steps. And like I said, it could take me 20, 30 minutes to give you the steps. But when you start going through it, and what I will do with the steps is post them once I update the live video and put the description and so forth. I will add the description of that 5-step process so that you'll have it. And for those who may be interested in the workshop next Saturday, that's going to be on the 6th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. There's going to be a link in the comments that you'll be able to click on, and it'll take you out through the payment process. If one person shows up, I'm going to give them some stuff that's going to be so dynamic that it's going to allow them to go through the shifting process, the change process, and understand, okay, this is how these things work. Now I can stay on track. The problem with so many people out there putting information out there is, like I said, they give us this placebo effect and we feel good for a moment. And then when things start showing, because creators will give you the impression, once you understand these principles, once you understand these laws, nothing ever bad ever seemingly happens in your life. Reality is always taking place, no matter what you're holding on the within. Reality is always going to be mirroring something that's contrary to distract you, to take you off track. So I don't want you to be dissuaded when all of a sudden you're doing all the right stuff and you lose your job. You find your relationship in challenge. You find that you may be experiencing some health issues and you say, well, I'm doing all the right steps. Why is this stuff showing up? That's just reality, to see if you're going to stick to what it is that you say that you believe long enough for it to show up into what we call this thing called, this holograph called reality. A lot of times we allow the without to shake us, then also we say, well, I'm going to, whether you're doing this stuff consciously or not, you're still manifesting. So why not manifest the life that you desire in spite of what's showing up in the hologram called reality. Keep your focus, and that's what you're going to learn in the Saturday workshop for those who may sign up. And like I said, if it's one person, that one person is going to get a wealth of information that's going to transform their life. My goal is to impart, even as with these talks, the tools that you need. Somebody said, I was talking to this Christian person. We were having a conversation on the YouTube channel. We were having this dialogue on, and he was talking. She was talking about their religious experience about God. And I said, listen, you don't need to have a membership to be in relationship with God. God's not bound by whatever that religious denomination, that sect, whatever. God's not bound by that. God is in each and every person. It can't be otherwise. It says, in him we live, we move, we have our existence. It can't be other. If you're living and breathing, God's in you. Now, you may be asleep to this divine essence, energy, life force called God, but it doesn't make it any less the existence. We're embodied in God, not God in us. We think we got God in us. We're in God collectively. So I was explaining that. This person was giving me all these scriptures and so forth. And I'm like, listen. And then like, you're like the blind leading the blind. I guess that kind of shows the glasses today. I said, listen, my goal isn't to lead anyone, but to have each person discover who God is for them. That's my goal is not to convert you to Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or Confucianism. I'm just making that up because I'm sure that's not how it's said. But my whole point is, my goal is not to tell you what to believe, but that you believe. And according to as you believe, you're going to be, do, and have. And that's what's going to show up in the hologram you call reality. It can't be otherwise. What I want to do is give you some tools so that you can begin creating the life of abundance, loving relationship, better health. Whatever it is that you want to create in your life, I want to give you the tools by allowing you, teaching you, showing you how to direct your own inner conversations. There's a scripture that says this: he, she that orders his, her conversations aright will be shown salvation. Now, we take this as a religious kind, and we're missing the whole point. What it's saying is that, what is it that you want? Who is it that you want to be? Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? That's the salvation. Joseph Murphy used to say to Lindo, my mentor, he says, they were having a conversation. He says, if a hamburger is the thing that you desire at the moment, then that hamburger at the moment is your salvation. Now, what we're not saying is that the hamburger is up on a cross or that's not what he's saying. The end result, the thing that you desire, salvation means deliverance from, to. So if you're hungry, then the end of the hunger, the salvation, is that sandwich. If you're lonely, we talked about halt. Don't allow yourself to get too hungry, too angry, too lonely, too tired. Whatever it is that you desire, people make desire all this bad thing. Desire is not bad. We can't live without desire. What do I mean by that? Your desire to want to get up and influence, touch somebody's life, make a living, whatever it is that you get up and want to, if you didn't have that, you say, well, listen, I don't have any. And there's many people that understand what I'm saying. They don't have any type of motivation. They get into a state of depression, and many of them just wither away. And then they transition into the next life. Desire is that thing that allows us to say, I want to get up in the morning. I want to start this new business venture. I want to shift from my current state to my new state of reality, whatever that is for you. So desire is that thing, that urging that says, I want to go from here to there. Like I said, we make desire this really evil thing. So, you don't ever desire, that's coming from the monk religion, but the truth of the Buddhist religion. But the truth of the matter is, even Buddhists, even Hindus, even Christians, whatever the faith is, have some desire at one level or another. Even if the desire is, I want to impact somebody's life. I want to have a day of peace and tranquility, and I just want to focus on the nothingness. Then that's the desire. So, what is that thing that you long for? That's the desire. And it's not for us to judge another person's desire and say, well, their desire is bad and mine is good. That's not our business. God is experiencing himself, herself, itself through approximately 8 billion people today. And each person is given to choose who it is that they're going to be, do, or have this day. And whatever that choice is, that's on the individual and the divine within them. Like I said, my goal is not to tell you what to believe, but simply that you do believe. And according to as you believe, that's what's going to determine what shows up in this hologram called reality. So let's move forward. So we're going back through the shift process. This is what we're using today. You see the pattern. Now, if the pattern is taking to you, the habit is taking you to where it is that you want to be, do, or have, then you keep on doing that. But let's say that it's not. Then you begin to halt. We talked about halt. For those who didn't get the halt, they can go back and listen to the early portion of this. But you halt the habit, that automatic thing. See, many of us are on automatic operating systems. And so we're living out what we call perpetual Groundhog Day. We keep doing the exact same thing. And we call that living, but what we're really doing is reproducing yesterday and taking yesterday into tomorrow until we interrupt, as we stated earlier, halt that pattern and say, I want to be doing something else. I want to be something else. And guys, you're given to choose to do so. You're given to choose. Let me add this in here too. There are no rules. And I know that I'm going to probably get some pushback. Rules are in place to help a society thrive or survive. But the rules are given by individuals and then they're passed down. And many of us are indoctrinated in the rules from birth. So many of us think that we came up with, oh, I was born in a Christian home. I was born in a Muslim home. I was born in an atheist home. I was born in an agnostic home. I was born in a Hindu home, Buddhist home. And we say, I decided this is who I wanted to believe. No, most of us believe what it is that we believe because that's how we've been indoctrinated. I can remember years ago, I was watching this program and it was talking about Germany at the time. And it was showing all these German kids being indoctrinated and so forth. And I thought to myself, man, I'm sure glad that I'm not in that society. And it wasn't until years later that I realized that I too was being indoctrinated for the 15, 16 years of school plus that I had endured. They were programming me and I was believing, like those children were believing, that they had freedom of choice. Most of what we believe is because we've been indoctrinated, propagandized to believe what it is that we believe. Not because we've set out consciously to say, you know what, do I really believe this? Or is this something that so a lot of times Christians will come to me and they'll approach me and they'll give me all these scriptures. And I realize, because I was them, that they're giving me their indoctrination, but not because they've sat into the silence and said, you know what, let me find out if these things are true for me. Now, they're true for them only because the indoctrination is the only thing but they've not looked at other things. I don't have to look at anything else. That's programming. If you look at, and I asked myself a few years back, what would I believe if I was raised in a Muslim home, in a Buddhist home, in a agnostic, in an atheist home? More than likely, I'm not saying that I couldn't have been converted to any other belief system, but your first 7 years of indoctrination tends to be the indoctrination that you carry with you for your entire life. Very few people change in the course of their life from their original indoctrination to something else. Now, it happens, but for the most part, most of us are fixed on the indoctrination. If we don't challenge that indoctrination, then we're only going to be able to live out the mindset, whether it be of poverty. This is why children who are indoctrinated in a wealth environment, they realize that I can go anywhere and I can attract, I can create wealth because that's the belief system that's been given to them. Likewise with somebody that's been placed in an impoverishment environment. Now, can we change that? Absolutely. I said that there are those who change, but the numbers are so small that often it's not even measurable. You have to purposely decide who it is that you want to be, do, and have. And this is why I say that there are no rules, but there is predominant programming that we've been indoctrinated throughout our lives that allow us, keep us believing certain things to be true. But you can challenge those certain things that you call truth and change them at any time. But that's the challenge. Because now, because you've changed, you expect people in your environment to understand your change. They're not. You got to understand, like Master Teacher, they said, I knew this guy when he was growing up. He played pranks and he did everything else that other kids did. They're going to still see the old you. You have to stay in the state, the new desired state, until it becomes fixed. Now, what's going to happen when that happens is some people are going to fall off. You're going to attract newer people, like-minded people. That's how it works. Abraham, leave your family and go to a land that I will show you. This was not a physical leaving. This was a mental leaving. It was a leaving, an elevation of mind. This is from Genesis to Revelation. This is your story. And it's written out in allegory. And it's basically showing you how your spiritual being works. When you make the shift from the old country, the old family, the familiar, to imagining something new, you begin to plant the seed of that thing which you are imagining. And the results will begin to show up if you hold on to them long enough. You got to allow the seed to germinate. But if you hold on to those thought patterns long enough in this hologram we call reality, it's just a matter of time before it's outpictured into what we call reality. Sometimes it happens quickly, and sometimes it takes a little longer. Your job is to hold the image of the thing that you want to be, do, or have. So let's go and go through the shift process again. So we see a pattern. If the pattern is taking us where we want to go, you keep doing it. Mr. Linda often asks students when they approach him, can you think your next thought? The ability to think your next thought and choose the desired outcome that you want is very powerful. I often say, imagine your past, remember your future. Why do I say that? You imagine your past as you want it to be. You remember your future from the ideal state or living in the end. See, when you start, there's really no such thing as time. There's only now. When you start imagining your future, you begin to set in motion the events. This is how powerful you are. You begin to set in motion the events to bring about that thing in your reality. Most of us that don't know just don't hold the image long enough for it to give birth. And so because we shift our image and we have what we call a miscarriage of that ideal. We have a spontaneous abortion of that. We abort that ideal and it's never brought into full growth. And so we say this stuff doesn't work. And the only thing that we can see at that moment is more evidence that this stuff doesn't work. But that's the stuff working. Okay, so we see the pattern. We shift the automatic habit. We pause. We begin to listen. Understand this. You're either living out your story, script, or you're living out somebody else's story and script. The wonderful thing about the story is that it can change. You can change it anytime. This is why I say that there are no rules. When you say that I'm not holding to this religious dogma, I'm not holding to this tradition of family. And again, some of those dogmas may serve you well, so you may want to hold on to them. Some of those traditions of family may serve you well. Again, you're looking at the patterns. If the pattern is serving you, keep doing it. I'm not trying to persuade you to say, oh, let all of it go. That's not what I'm saying. You're determining if my life is where it is that I want it to be. If you're on track to doing, being, and having, then you don't need to change a thing. But if not, and you want to begin to see desired change, then thought patterns are going to have to change. Habits are going to have to change. You're going to have to interrupt some belief systems, some old theology, some old traditions. They're going to have to be interrupted if you want to bring about something different. Because the only thing that you can get by doing what you've always done is what you've always gotten. Can't be otherwise. Okay, so interrupt the script. Begin telling yourself a new story. See, that's the wonderful thing about this thing. We've been told purposefully, stop make-believing, stop fantasizing, get your head out of the clouds, stop writing these fantasized stories, whatever. Those who know understand that's how change takes place. People that grew up in poverty started envisioning wealth, even before the wealth began to manifest itself. And this is what we're seeing in the story of Abraham. And throughout Scripture, you're seeing a person start off a particular way, and then in the end, there's a transformation or a rebirth. This is your story from Genesis to Revelation. It's letting you see how this thing we call life, the hologram, works. The patriarchs started changing the way that he or she thought. Patriarchs, matriarchs, they changed the way that they thought. They started getting different results. Then they started living legacy. Most of us stay in the same thought pattern, but we keep hoping that we're going to get a different result. It's an impossibility. And those who tell you that, they either don't know or they're lying to you to keep you stuck. Okay, so we made a shift from the state. We interrupted the script. We started rewriting the story. Like I said, for those who want to go deeper, that Saturday workshop, the link's going to be in the bio. That's going to take you there. It's going to give you some tools that you'll be able to listen to repeatedly. It's going to give you some things to get you in the right frequency and things like that. But when you interrupt the thought, there's a saying that says nature abhors a vacuum. Let me touch on that real quick. When you replace an old thought, when you remove old thought, you just can't leave your mind vacant. If you leave it vacant, master teacher said this, that if you clean a house out, you sweep the house out, and you get all the negative spirits out. If you don't fill that vacancy with something positive, the negative spirits not only return, but they come back multiplied. So let me give you a quick script. It says, resist error. That's that thought that you don't want to think, not taking you where you want to go, and it will flee. It'll go away. It says, draw near to good, and the good that you're drawing near to by way of your predominant thoughts, because now that's what you're giving your attention to, is going to draw near to you. Now, they say devil and they say God, but again, we're talking metaphorically. This is how you work. Scripture was telling you how to replace an old thought and replace that old thought with a new thought and bring about a new result. So resist error, and the error is going to go away because you're not giving error your attention, but you have to fill the void with something positive, something good, what it is that you want to be, do, or have. And you say, well, coach, I tried that, and you got to keep doing it. See, many people in these communities have taught us to be lazy. You're going to be thinking about something anyway, but when that becomes your habit, maybe you need to get some pictures on your phone. Maybe you need to get some pictures on a whiteboard in front of you. Maybe you need to have posties all around. Whatever you need to do to keep your thought focused on the thing that you want to be, do, or have, you implement that and you put those things in place so that your thoughts predominantly will be focused on those things. Pretty soon you won't even have to think about it. It'll be a habit. And the reason why it's going to become a habit is because you've done it consistently and persistently, it's going to become the way that you think. Absolutely. There's trillions, if not more, of thoughts around you. You're inundated with thoughts. Now, because we have something in us called a reticular activating system. Sandwich is saying that, the if you a thought always has to fill the void of the mind, so you can always be thinking something. This is absolutely true, except for those who practice mindfulness. But even in that moment of mindfulness, your focus is on nothing, and so the focus on nothing is really something. But I'm not going there. The whole point is you're always thinking. As Mr. Linder would say, you're always thinking ahead of your evidence. See, we believe that, oh, I thought that thought yesterday, it shouldn't matter. Thoughts don't fall into the past, they advance into your future. So as you begin thinking on what it is that you want to be, do, or have, and you giving that more of your attention, what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing the results. Now, will other things pop up? Absolutely. But see, you won't be moved solely by the other things that pop up. One time years back, I was diagnosed with some ailment. I was excited. Most people were operating from fear. I was excited because I'm like, I can't wait to see how this thing works out. But that energy allowed for what? That thing to work out. Now, if I had taken on the mindset that said, oh, this is the end of me, I almost guarantee it that diagnosis would have been the end of me. What about you, Creator? What is that thing that you're giving your attention to? Again, when we're going through the shift, you see the pattern. You halt that thing, that habit that's not serving you. You interrupt the script and you begin to write a new script. Then you begin to forge a new state. Now, this is where most people have a challenge when we're talking about forging the state. Neville says embody the state, go into the end. When you're forging a new state, and again, we're talking about this SHIFT acronym, and that's going to be pasted in the description once everything's done, once I update it. When you're forging a new state, what you're doing is clothing yourself. What you're not doing, first of all, let me let you know what you're not doing. You're not hoping so. You're not wishful thinking. You're not, if everything works out. If you say, I want to be a multimillionaire, you clothe yourself in the persona. You're a spiritual entity having a human experience. I was raised believing that I was this human being that had this spirit within me. No, your spirit, and you're embodying that spirit is clothing itself, encamping itself around this thing called a body. Spirit is holding body together. Body is not holding spirit together. Why is this relevant? If you understand that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, the way that this works then, whatever you hold as thought, belief, it says, as a man, woman thinks in her heart feeling nature, so is she, so has she, so does you. Some of you are going to get caught up and you're going to think I'm talking about religion. That's not what I'm saying. I'm letting you know how this stuff works. I'm just using the vernacular of what's familiar to me. You're a spiritual being, an energy being, a life force that is encamped around a body. I know that that's not what we've been taught. Being the case, the way that this works, you hold a thought. In holding that thought, you begin to attract to spirit, life force, the elements of that thought, that vibration that you're holding. This is why they say that we're like magnets and we're either attracting or we're repelling. Scripture talks about the have and have nots. That's not a Tyler Perry series. Let me briefly, for those who may not know the law of have and have not, it says, to him who has, her who has, more shall be given. Sounds fair. If you have it, then more should be given. But most of us are misunderstanding the having, but I'll touch on this real quick. But to him, her who has not, even that which they have shall be taken away from them. Now we say, because we're thinking at a human level, that's not fair. They already have riches and wealth. they're not talking about riches and wealth. Now, riches and wealth happens to when you're harmonizing with money, then of course you begin to attract money. But it's talking about what you're vibrating. So whatever you're holding in frequency, you're going to get more of that. So let's say that you're holding love in frequency, then you're going to see more evidence of love being attracted to you. And anything other than love, that's going to be repelled. Let's say that you're holding abundance in frequency, and you just feel like abundance comes to me easily and effortlessly. Everything that you look at, you're going to be processed, and you're going to be like, man, there's a wealth ideal right there. There's abundance ideal right there. Man, everything that I see an opportunity. You ever come across those people that everything that they see an opportunity? It's because they're holding the vibration, the frequency of abundance. Now, for the person that's holding a lack vibration, this is the person that doesn't have. They could just win a lottery ticket. Let's say a multi-million-dollar lottery ticket. They're going to be operating from fear, and they're going to be like, somebody's going to try to get this from me. Somebody's going to take this from me. They're operating. So in a very short period of time, the money that they manifested, they're going to find a way to lose it. They can't hold it because they're not holding the vibration. Same with relationships. You get certain people, no matter how they look, they may not be attractive in world standards, whatever that means, but they keep attracting people that we deem to be attractive. And we're like, how does she keep getting... There was a guy, his name was Lewis. When I worked my first job at the hospital, I was in the dietary department, worked in the kitchen. I washed dishes. But Lewis was one of the guys that helped me. Lewis was not an attractive guy, but Lewis found himself around some of the most beautiful women, and we were always in awe. How was he doing it? Lewis was holding the vibration that he could attract beautiful women. You know, and like I said, we were kids. We didn't believe that we could, so we didn't. This is why, like I said, you can see somebody that you're like, they don't have any money or whatever, and yet they believe that they can attract money. It's like a guy by the name of Barnes. He said that he was going to work with Thomas Edison, and everybody laughed at him because he didn't have any money. He rode a train to get to where Thomas Edison was working, didn't have any money, was homeless, and he kept saying, I'm going to work with I'm a partner with Thomas Edison. And in a very short period of time, Barnes partnered with Thomas Edison. What I'm saying to you is, when you're holding, if you're saying that this stuff doesn't work, it's because you're simply holding the wrong vibration. When you shift the frequency, and you'll learn that for those who attend the Saturday workshop, I'm plugging the Saturday workshop, you're going to learn how to tap into your frequency. When you hold the frequency of loving relationships, better health, more money, whatever that thing is that you want. I'm just naming stuff off. It could be, I want to have a new dog. I don't know what the thing is, but whatever that, once you start holding the energy, the vibration, opportunities, I promise you, if I've seen this not only in my life, but the lives of others, multiple times. Matter of fact, people will come into my YouTube channel and they'll post talking about their own events. So you can go out there and see those also being posted. My point to you is, when you're holding the frequency of the vibration of the thing that you want, not what you don't want, understand when you're focused on worry, when you're focused on fear, when you're focused on lack, that's a prayer for more of the same. We think that prayer is when we get on our knees and we say, oh Lord, Father, please help me. If you're praying to energy, life force, Father, for the things that you don't want, you're making a request for more of what you don't want. God does it, and I'm going to get some pushback, and it's okay. Energy, life force, source doesn't operate from your words, it operates from your vibration. What are you holding in vibration? Whatever you're resonating, to him, her who has, more shall be given. To him, her who has not, even that which they have will be taken away from them. Let not the double-minded person believe that they shall receive anything from the law of right decree. As a man, woman thinks in his or her heart. These are different ways saying what I just said. Whatever you're holding in vibration, predominantly, and can a cure come from somebody that's holding negative vibration? Absolutely. The problem is, because they're holding the negative vibration, Often the cure of money, the cure of health, the cure of relationship often is short-lived because they can't hold the vibration. So the person that gets into a loving relationship, they're going to do something to cheat on me. I've just had experiences where, I can't trust whatever the sex is. And they're going to, so what they do is discover evidence of somebody cheating on them. Person that probably never cheated in their whole life, all of a sudden they get with this person, they want to cheat on them because that's the vibration that the other person is expecting of them to do. And they're almost forcing them to cheat on them because that's the expectation. They've discovered with schools, with teachers, when they tell teachers that they have gifted students and the teacher believes that those students are gifted, even the worst student rises to the top. But when a teacher says, these are bad children, there's nothing, they can be intelligent. These are bad children, there's not much you can do with them. Even the best student drops to the bottom. What am I saying to you, creators? I'm saying thoughts become things. And whatever you're holding as your predominant thought, that's what's going to show up in your life. Let me go on and see if we get to the last point. So we talked about, I want to kind of reemphasize, see the pattern. If the pattern is what it is that you want, you keep doing it. Halt it if not. Then you begin to interrupt the script, and then you forge the new state. And we've talked about this. So for those who are interested, you can go back and you can listen to that. Again, for those who want to go deeper, Saturday workshop, Saturday to 6. The link will be in the comments after I update everything. But, okay, so last step. You got to take action. Mine says transmute action, but I like to say you got to take action. I think one of the biggest downfalls in this community, everybody wants to think about what it is they want to be, do, or have, but they don't want to become. If you're doing, let's say Neville Goddard, if you're doing what Neville says, and everybody agrees with him, when you're talking about spiritual teachers and so forth, everybody agrees with them. Very few people, for the most part, says there's nothing you have to do on your part. If you're living in the end, hear the word, living in the end. You're living being that person that you desire to be. Just by living, embodying, being. So if you're living in the end of loving relationship, you're learning how to be a more loving person. If you're living in the end of abundance, you're learning how to manage more money. If you're living in the end of better health, you're not abusing your body. You're doing what's necessary to improve your body. You're being the person that you desire to be. So when I say taking action, I'm not saying take action to try to force something to happen. But a plant, if you plant a plant into a ground, its automatic response is to break through the soil, whether that soil is concrete or no matter what it is, whatever the barrier is, the plant's natural desire is to break through that soil. It's not going to lay dormant in the ground and says, well, I'm just not going to come up because I don't need to do anything. By its nature, you see little twigs coming through boulders, rocks, and so forth, where the plant has woven itself through. By your nature of the thing that you say that you want to be, do, or have, you start taking the necessary action of that person that takes such action. And over a course of time, you're going to be that person because you're living in the end of that person. You've clothed yourself in that persona. You've become that person that takes those actions. Again, everything that we talked about in the shift will be, put in the description. So I'll put that out there. For those who may be interested, again, not interested, no problem. If there's one person that joins the workshop, they're going to get a wealth of information and they're going to learn how to literally transform their life. Little side note. When I was a kid, there's nowhere in the world that, because of where I was from, my indoctrination, primarily alcoholism, drug addiction, half of my siblings being in and out of incarceration, that should have been my story. But early on, I learned some tools about shifting. Now, I didn't even know that that's what I was learning. I didn't know that when I went into the military and they were reprogramming me and indoctrinating me from civilian to Marine, that I was learning tools. I didn't know when I was working at a Fortune 10 company that the stuff that I was learning at that Fortune 10 company was reprogramming me to be somebody else than who I was at the moment. I didn't know when I did my first YouTube video that I would be speaking to you guys. What I'm saying to you is, when the shift happens, this sounds like I said another word, when the shift happens, it's going to almost seem normal and natural. And it's only as you look back in time from hindsight to say, oh, I can remember the exact moment that my shift happened. And understand this, guys, you're having these shifts all the time. You're being born again over and over and over. There may have been something that I said that resonated with you, that said, wow, I never thought about that. At that moment, when that seed was planted, you became somebody else. This is how the shift happens. And like I said, sometimes it happens so normal and so natural, as Neville will often say, it would have happened anyway. The truth of the matter is, it wouldn't have happened without you having that change of consciousness. But because you had the change of consciousness, shift happens. Guys, I love you. And I don't know if we'll have any more of these talks between now and the end of the year, but I appreciate those who show up, and I appreciate those who will show up after the talk. Guys, I love you and I appreciate you, and have a great and abundant day. And for those who are interested, the link will be in the comments about the upcoming workshop. For those who are interested, not interested, enjoy the video. Love you guys.